Imagine a world where all stories are told at the same pace. That would be so boring. That is why it is so important as a writer to understand pacing in your story. I have dialogued with you, my viewers, and my friends, and one of the consistent things that's come up as being a struggle in your writing is pacing. So that's one of the reasons why I'm making this video today. So what is pacing? Pacing is the speed that a story is told in, or the rate at which something changes. I have 5 tips for you about understanding pacing in your writing. But first, I want to say this. The first thing you got to do when you're understanding pacing is it's really important to understand story structure models. So there's quite a few different types of story structures, but the top 3 that I refer to more than the others is the 3-act story structure, the hero's journey, and to save a cat. And I've made videos about the 3-act story structure and the hero's journey, and I will put those in the description so you can check those out if you want to understand more about those. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to look at the 3-act story structure to give you an example of what I mean about the pacing in your story. The inciting incident should occur at or before the 12% mark in the story. If your inciting incident happens at the, say, 30 or 40% mark, the story's going to be slow and your pacing's not going to be correct. It's not going to be good, and you will lose readers. So that's one example of why it's important to understand story structure when you're looking at pacing. Here are my 5 writing tips to have better pacing in your story. And tip number 1 is map out your story. Now, it doesn't matter where you're at in the writing process. If you are in the outlining stage or the beginning story ideas stage, or even looking back at a rough draft and looking at the revision stage, what you want to do is you want to look at what you're doing and look at the pacing. Think of your scene like a roller coaster. So one of my favorite rides to go on at an amusement park is a really good roller coaster. You sit down, you get strapped in, and it shoots you out, and you go, and it builds, and until it gets to the top, and then it shoots down, and it goes up and down, and it's a variety of highs and lows. That's what you want in your story. You want highs and you want lows. So look at your story, no matter where you're at in the process, and ask yourself, is this scene a high or a low? And what you can do is you can actually create a really great visual for you to look at. You can use sticky notes, or you can do this on the computer. I personally like using sticky notes because they're just visually, I like it. And so for each scene, you write scene 1, and is this a high or a low? And you can literally stick these on the wall, high, low, and then you can step back and you can see the big picture, and you can see if you have a spot where you've got too many lows for too long, you need to add something to give it a little bit to speed up the pacing, to change the pacing. If you've got too many highs, then you need to give the reader a break, but you can very clearly see this by creating that visual map of each scene. If you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe and click that bell notification so you don't miss any future videos. Writing tip number 2 is vary your sentence length. So if you have shorter sentences that are more simple sentences, that's going to speed up the pacing of your story. And also, if you have longer sentences that are more complex, that's going to slow down the pacing of your story. So one of the tricks that you can use to adjust the pacing in your story is to look at your sentence lengths and determine if you need to shorten the sentence or longer the sentences, whichever one you're needing for that particular scene. Writing tip number 3 is add subplots. So if you're looking at the pacing of your story and it's just flying by and you need to slow it down a little bit, when you add subplots, you are slowing down the pacing of your story and it will take a little bit longer to get to the climax of your story. What is a subplot? A subplot is a secondary conflict that arises due to the actions and reactions of your main character. It's way more than another storyline. Think about it like a tapestry. We have the main storyline, and then we have the subplots that are woven throughout and around the main storyline. They're all interconnected. One of the questions you can ask is, what if? So when a character interacts with another character, you can ask, well, what if there's something going on there? And I can explore that and add a subplot using that particular character's interaction with the main character. Writing tip number 4 is add description. So an appropriate amount of description inserted at the right time can really give the reader the opportunity to slow down, take a breath, and smell the roses. I like to think about it like a painting in that it shows more of the picture of what's happening. And you can also add those sensory details, which is why I like the analogy of smelling the roses, because you want your reader to experience what's happening. And that includes with, what does it smell like? What does it taste like? What do they see? What are they hearing? Those sensory details really add fullness and dimension to your writing, and it will slow down the pacing just a little bit. You want to be really careful with this because you don't want to do too much description and lose your reader. You want to do just enough to give enough depth to allow the reader to really experience the story. A little description goes a long way. Writing tip number 5 is think variety and contrast. When you have a variety of fast and slow, it allows the reader to experience the story, and during the slow times, the reader's able to catch their breath. If a story is told with one action scene after another, and it's just a series of highs, the problem with that is the reader doesn't have a chance to really process what's happening. The action scenes lose their power because there's too much of it. Keep in mind that roller coaster. The highs are powerful because we know there's a low coming, and we enjoy the low because we know another high is coming. It's the same thing with your story and the pacing in your story. One last thought about pacing is don't be in a hurry to get to the climax. A lot of new writers struggle with how to end their story, and so they end up rushing the end. Don't rush the end. Take your time and use pacing to weave the highs and lows and weave those subplots in there and give the reader a chance to really enjoy the story, to smell the roses, and to enjoy the journey with the characters in your story. Thanks for watching. I will catch you in the next video.